is to end our Federal Reserve relationship. If Chuck Baldwin and I were in office now, I'm speaking for Chuck, I think I can do that, but certainly for me, I would demand that these Federal Reserve banks turn their stock over to Congress. And they could remain as clearinghouse banks if they wanted to, or they could go their way, whatever they wanted. And they might be happy to have that rather than to be indicted and sentenced to prison for crimes against humanity and robbery and so forth for 100 years. But that's our solution to it. If we move from there to one more problem or issue, and that would be our foreign policy now, which is a real problem because people are being killed and killing in the Middle East. It's the latest war. It reminds me so much of my war, the same stories, you know. People tell me, I was on a radio show with a fellow the other day who said, do you think it's a good thing that Iran get nuclear weapons? I said, no, it's not a good thing. But it's not a good thing that China have nuclear weapons, or Russia, or North Korea, or Pakistan, or Israel, or even us. But we do, and they do too. So what are we going to do about it? I mean, should we go and attack North Korea? I noticed we just took them off the terrorist watch list, by the way. But in my war, we were told that if you don't go over there and fight these people in their own land in the Far East, the communists are going to be climbing up the beaches in California before you know it. So we did. You know, for 10 years on the books, we fought them for 10 other years off the books. But if you read Ho Chi Minh's autobiography, it's all in there. It's interesting stuff. But the point is, now we have most favored nation trade status with that country. That was our enemy since from 1974 to 1954 to 1975. This country was our enemy. We have most favored nation trade status with them now. And here's the other side of the coin. In Iraq and Afghanistan, now we're negotiating with the Sunni insurgents in Iraq, and we're using Iran as a go-between to do that in these back-channel negotiations. Condoleezza Rice is doing it in Afghanistan, which is really a true picture of Vietnam, if you want to think about it. You might say that's a good war if you want to, because we entered it ostensibly to chase down Osama bin Laden and the people who caused the 9/11 attacks, but whatever. We entered it, and it really was a civil war at the time. There was a group of people in the south of the country, they called themselves the Taliban. You saw all the pictures on TV just before the attacks, our attacks on them, I mean. You'd see the men beating their women with sticks and so forth, and everybody was outraged about that. In the northern part of the country, there was another group of tribesmen that was called the Northern Alliance. That's what we chose to call them. These people all came together under the leadership of the Russians and the Iranians, who helped us put this alliance together. We entered this civil war on their part against the Taliban. And we routed the Taliban for a while, as you know, because we were bombing across the border in Pakistan, cutting off their supply routes. Well, all that's over now. If you've been reading in the paper, the Taliban is now gaining control. Again, in the southern part of Afghanistan, is the government that we set up in Kabul is negotiating openly with the Taliban to try to end hostilities. But we have the same supply problem that we had in Vietnam. For 10 years, we've tried to shut off supplies from the north. I mean, we dumped thousands of tons of Agent Orange on their jungles to strip away the foliage so that we could see them from the air as they moved supplies south. We seeded the clouds to make it rain in these jungles so that the land would be muddy and they couldn't move supplies as well. But because of the rules of engagement, the things that had to be done to stop resupply could not be done. Same thing in Pakistan now. Pakistan's run by well, I was going to say he's a lunatic, but you know what they say. Their homicidal maniacs aren't nearly as bad as our homicidal maniacs sometimes, but it's a nuclear-armed country in any regard, and they are refusing now to allow us to stop resupply of the Taliban. So my point is, we're negotiating with the Taliban, we're negotiating with the Sunni insurgents, people that we fought And we fought them now for over 7 years. I remind you that in less than 4 years, this country defeated Nazi Germany, the Japanese Empire, and the Italians at the same time. And in the case of Japan, we bombed their country into a fiery holocaust. We dropped 2 nuclear bombs on them. And now we owe them over $1 trillion. I mean, that's our biggest creditor. It's not China, it's Japan. So what goes around comes around, and one thing leads to another. But to me, it's all just nonsense and posturing, and it's all, you know, there's nothing grand and glorious about war, I can tell you. It's about killing and dying and very little else. Some people might profit from it. Some people might gain power from it. But the rest of us just fill the cemeteries on both sides, you know, and it's a terrible thing. And so the Constitution Party is in favor of stopping it immediately. As Ron Paul said, you just march in, we can just march out. Now, last word on it, we're not naive enough to believe that that wouldn't cause problems. It would. Problems that would not have been there if we hadn't done it, but they're there now. If we left Iraq immediately, it would cause a greatly empowered and expanded Iran, and all of the repercussions that would cause. Same thing with Afghanistan and Pakistan. But you know, in Afghanistan, the Russians had 120,000 troops there, and they tried for 7 or 8 years to pacify that country, and they couldn't. They wanted to build an oil pipeline across Afghanistan, as do we. Neither country. These people are not so easy to pacify. I mean, the British Empire tried for, what, 100 years? And they couldn't do it. Point is, the Russians had 120,000 people. We've got 50, including 12,000 from NATO, and the rest of them are ours. And so it's not working out so well for us. This new president, whoever he is, and I'm coming to the end, but whoever it turns out to be is going to face some real problems. And